You think you know power until you realize the man you humiliated owns everything you depend on. Claire muttered under her breath as she smoothed her dress in the hallway mirror, not yet aware that Marcus Bennett, the husband she publicly called useless just hours ago, held the keys to the very contract she was about to sign. The room smelled faintly of red wine, a stark reminder of the moment she had laughed, lifted her glass, and let it spill across his crisp white shirt, a spectacle meant to shame, but instead, it had revealed nothing about the man she thought she knew. Marcus had entered the corporate world silently, methodically, building layers of influence and ownership while remaining a figure of quiet support at home. And as Claire prepared for the crucial meeting with the investors, she had no idea that the decision she was about to make depended entirely on him. She rehearsed her lines, practiced her smile, and attempted to project confidence, yet every step toward the boardroom was a reminder that she had underestimated the depth of his presence. The building hummed with the usual morning energy, elevators clanking, assistants rushing with folders and coffee, unaware that the quiet figure in the corner of the room, Marcus, watched with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the chaos she attempted to control. His eyes met hers briefly from across the glass partitions, a small nod acknowledging the unseen knowledge and authority he wielded, and for the first time, Claire felt a flicker of unease as her mind raced through possibilities she hadn't considered. Marcus had not retaliated, not yet, choosing instead to observe, to measure, to ensure that every move was accounted for, every risk assessed. As she entered the boardroom, the air shifted, the investors paused, noticing Marcus's presence, sensing the change in dynamics without knowing the full story. Claire began her presentation, highlighting projections and strategies, but each word felt heavier as Marcus's gaze remained steady, not condescending, merely present, reminding her that the power she assumed was hers to command was in his hands. The documents on the table, the contracts, the figures, all signaled potential triumphs and failures, yet Marcus's silent ownership made every detail a reflection of his unseen influence. Claire stumbled briefly, realizing that the room no longer responded solely to her energy, but to the combined presence of authority she had ignored. Her colleagues exchanged subtle glances, some whispering, others simply pausing, and Marcus allowed no expression of triumph to cross his face, only the quiet reminder that he controlled the narrative. As the meeting continued, she struggled internally, balancing professional composure with personal anxiety, each phrase she delivered now colored by the awareness that Marcus's judgment, patience, and strategic mind had shaped outcomes she believed she could dictate. When the investors asked questions about contingencies, Marcus provided clarifying points with precision, reinforcing strategies that mirrored his meticulous planning, while Claire could only follow, realizing that her past underestimation of his competence was more than a mistake. It was a misreading of his entire character. By the end of the meeting, deals were tentatively agreed upon, but Claire's confidence was shaken. She had learned, quietly, that the man she thought she could humiliate at a party was the same man who now defined the terms of her success. And as Marcus closed the folder, stood, and nodded to the team, Claire understood that nothing about her world remained the same. She left the room, a mix of awe, fear, and newfound respect flooding her thoughts, realizing that humility had been demanded in the subtlest yet most powerful way, and that Marcus Bennett, her husband, had not only survived her contempt but had quietly ensured that he held the ultimate authority over the contract and, by extension, the very future she had sought to control. Claire walked slowly through the quiet corridor after the meeting, her mind racing with the realization that Marcus Bennett's quiet control had shifted the entire dynamic in ways she had never anticipated. The soft click of her heels echoed off the polished floors, each step a reminder that she had underestimated the man she had publicly dismissed, and as she reached the private lounge, Marcus appeared from the shadowed doorway, his presence calm, deliberate, yet commanding, and she noticed the subtle authority in his posture, the effortless way he carried himself that spoke louder than any words. Sitting across from her, he did not lecture, did not chastise, only observed her reactions, noting the tension and humility now apparent in her expression, and for the first time, Claire felt the weight of responsibility and power she had ignored in him. She tried to focus on the documents she had brought, attempting to regain composure and control over the narrative she thought she owned. But Marcus's mere presence made it clear that control was no longer solely hers to wield, and every choice she made was now filtered through the lens of his unseen but palpable authority. As she spoke about future plans, Marcus interjected with questions that were precise, insightful, and pointed, guiding the conversation in ways that highlighted his understanding of the business and strategy, demonstrating that while she had been the face negotiating the deal, he had silently orchestrated the groundwork for its success, and Claire found herself adapting to his rhythm, acknowledging the depth of his foresight and influence in ways she had never before considered. Her confidence mingled with a newfound respect and cautious admiration. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly with every exchange, assistants and colleagues sensing the quiet power dynamics at play, and even the investors noticed the difference, reacting to the combination of Claire's visible leadership and Marcus's understated yet undeniable control. As the discussion moved toward financial projections and contractual clauses, Claire realized that the leverage she thought she possessed was always secondary to the strategic position Marcus had maintained, and each negotiation point she raised was met with calm, measured input that reinforced the fact that he had anticipated challenges and solutions in ways she had overlooked. By the end of the meeting, Claire felt a mixture of accomplishment and revelation, recognizing that her earlier dismissive attitude had been naive, that Marcus's patience and silent management had protected not only his interests but also hers, ensuring that success was achieved despite her previous misconceptions. And as they exited the boardroom together, the unspoken understanding between them had shifted. The balance of perception and power now realigned in favor of the man she had underestimated, leaving Claire both humbled and awakened to the intricate and quiet strength Marcus possessed, a strength that would continue to guide, influence, and define outcomes beyond what she could have imagined. By the time Claire reached her office, the city skyline beyond the glass wall looked sharper than it had that morning, as if the entire world had been redrawn with lines she had never noticed. She closed the door behind her and stood still, one hand pressed against the leather folder in her arms, hearing the low hum of the building, the distant elevator chime, the muted voices of assistants moving down the corridor. Everything outside her office continued normally. Inside, nothing felt normal. The meeting had not collapsed, but her confidence had. That was the part no one else could see. On paper, the $100 million deal was still alive. The projections remained strong. The investors had nodded. Her name still appeared on the presentation materials. But now every page carried a shadow she could not ignore. Marcus Bennett was not a quiet husband wandering into her professional world by accident. He was the controlling owner, the final authority, the man whose signature could move the deal forward or freeze it in place. Claire set the folder on her desk and looked at her reflection in the dark computer screen. Same tailored blouse, same polished hair, same woman who had walked into the morning believing she was the center of the room. Only now she could still feel the memory of red wine spilling over his white shirt the night before, the shocked silence around the table, Derek Lawson's smirk, her own voice calling Marcus useless because cruelty sounded clever when people laughed. Her stomach tightened. She had expected Marcus to be embarrassed. She had expected him to retreat into that calm silence she had learned to dismiss. She had not expected him to appear in the boardroom with documents, ownership authority, and a voice so steady it made every apology she had not made feel louder. Her phone buzzed. Derek. She stared at the name for a moment before answering. His voice came fast, too casual, the way men sound when panic is wearing cologne. So, what exactly happened in there? Claire walked to the window and looked down at traffic moving in thin, silver lines below. He knew, she said. Derek paused. Knew what? Everything. The ownership. The approval structure. The conduct review. Derek exhaled sharply, then tried to laugh. Come on, Claire, do not let him scare you. It is still your deal. She closed her eyes. That sentence might have worked yesterday. Today it sounded childish. It is not my deal if he controls final approval. Derek went quiet again, and in that silence she heard the first crack in his confidence. Last night, Derek had leaned back at the private signing dinner and told her she had outgrown a man like Marcus. He had called Marcus deadweight in a low voice near the bar, smiling as if insult were sophistication. When Claire picked up the wine glass, Derek had not stopped her. He had watched. Maybe he had wanted the scene. Maybe he liked seeing her prove loyalty to the version of herself he kept flattering. But now consequences had entered the room, and Derek was suddenly careful. "You should frame it as a private marital misunderstanding," he said. "Keep it away from the board." Claire opened her eyes. "Patricia Wells already has witness emails." "Who sent emails?" he asked too quickly. Claire turned from the window. "Junior staff. Assistants. People who saw enough." Another pause. Then Derek lowered his voice. "Claire, listen to me. Do not let this become about me." There it was. The smallest sentence with the biggest confession. Not "Are you okay?" Not "I should not have encouraged you." Not "Marcus did not deserve that." "Do not let this become about me." Claire looked at the red mark still faintly visible on the cuff of her coat from where the wine had splashed back the night before. She had thought Derek represented the life Marcus could not give her. Fast rooms, sharp jokes, fearless ambition, people who treated confidence like currency. But confidence is easy before risk receives your address. Marcus had not needed to threaten anyone. He had simply placed the deal under review, and the people who had laughed with her were already stepping away from the spill. She ended the call without saying goodbye. A minute later, an email arrived from Patricia Wells, corporate counsel for Marcus's ownership group. Subject: 72-hour conduct and compliance review. Claire opened it with a hand that did not feel entirely steady. The language was clean, professional, almost merciless in its neutrality. Final approval paused. Leadership conduct under review. Witness statements requested. External communications frozen until senior compliance assessment. Lead negotiator status pending review. Each line landed like a door closing softly down a long hallway. Claire sat down slowly. For years, she had told herself Marcus was too quiet for rooms like this, too ordinary for the pace of her life, too steady to understand the hunger that drove real success. Now the room was answering for him. The deal did not die. Her illusion did. Claire sat in the glass-walled conference room, the city light reflecting off her polished desktop, and felt the weight of every word that had been exchanged the night before. The emails, the whispers, the small smirks from colleagues who thought they understood the dynamics, all compounded into a silent storm pressing against her chest. She reviewed the documents Marcus had authorized in his quiet, assertive tone, noting the subtle changes that had been implemented without fanfare. Deadlines extended, signatories adjusted, clauses highlighted for compliance review. Her mind wandered briefly to the spilled wine, the red mark that still seemed to linger in her memory, and the shock on the faces around her as she called Marcus useless, a word she had meant lightly, but which now felt monumental. The realization that Marcus had orchestrated the situation from the shadows made her pulse quicken, a mixture of respect, fear, and the necessity for recalibration of her strategy. Her phone buzzed, a reminder from Derek, who had been acting as intermediary in the negotiation, his tone cautious, asking if she had received Patricia Wells' latest communication. Claire exhaled and confirmed she had, noting the phrasing, the meticulous attention to protocol, and the subtle power embedded in each sentence. The review period would pause all outgoing communications. Any deviation could be noticed, and Marcus' presence would dominate the perception of authority. She leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a moment to consider the implications. The deal scale, the media attention that could ensue, the internal politics within the corporate structure, and how her own reputation could be shaped or shattered in the ensuing days. She reviewed her own intentions, her career trajectory, and the delicate balance between professional pride and personal entanglement with someone who had always held invisible sway over her decisions. Every call she made, every document she sent, now required precision and mindfulness, as if the room itself observed her choices. Her eyes drifted to the skyline again, the traffic below moving in unbroken patterns, a stark contrast to the disruption in her internal landscape. Claire recognized the stakes. Marcus' silence was deliberate, his influence pervasive, and her own position required careful maneuvering to maintain authority without overstepping into vulnerability. She took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts for the meeting scheduled in an hour, where she would address key stakeholders with composure, ensuring that her message conveyed competence and awareness, not panic or betrayal. Every movement in the office now had a potential echo, every expression a possible interpretation by those aware of the nuances she had barely started to grasp. The memory of Derek's casual warning, the subtle glance at the spilled wine, reminded her of the stakes involved, that the perception of control and the reality of influence often diverged, and she needed to navigate the thin line carefully. Claire adjusted her posture, straightening her blouse, smoothing her hair, and resolved to confront the upcoming discussions with clarity, conscious that every step was under scrutiny, that Marcus' presence, though quiet, defined the room, and that she had to ensure that her own authority was recognized without inflaming the latent tensions that had built up around her, a careful dance of words, gestures, and calculated confidence that would determine the course of the deal, her professional standing, and the subtle power dynamics that now govern the office space, every choice echoing with potential consequences in the delicate web of corporate influence, personal pride, and professional reputation. Derek Lawson arrived at Claire's office at 11:12, carrying a tablet, a paper cup of coffee, and the expression of a man trying to look calm while counting exits. Claire noticed it immediately. The confidence he had worn the night before at the signing dinner had changed texture. Last night, he had been all easy smiles and low comments near the bar, feeding her pride one polished sentence at a time. Today, his tie was slightly crooked, his hair less perfect, his eyes moving too often toward the glass wall where assistants passed with folders and careful faces. Consequences do that to people. They remove the music from their swagger. Claire stood behind her desk, Patricia Wells' email open on the screen, the conduct review language glowing in clean black letters. Derek closed the door and said, "We need to get ahead of this." Claire looked at him. "We?" He stopped, just briefly. That small pause told her more than the rest of the conversation would. Derek set the coffee down without drinking it and said Marcus was overplaying his hand, that ownership did not give him the right to turn a private marital issue into a corporate review, that if she stayed firm, the board would not risk losing a $100 million transaction over one awkward dinner. One awkward dinner. Claire felt the phrase hit her chest and fall flat. She remembered the wine leaving the glass, the dark red splash across Marcus's white shirt, the room going silent before Derek laughed softly enough to give everyone else permission to breathe again. She remembered Marcus standing there, not humiliated in the way she had expected, but still, almost frighteningly still, as if a door inside him had closed without making sound. She had mistaken that stillness for weakness. Derek had helped her mistake it. Now he wanted to rename the whole thing as awkward. Claire crossed her arms. "Patricia has witness statements." Derek's jaw tightened. "From who?" Claire did not answer. His eyes sharpened. "Claire, if junior staff are exaggerating because they want to look ethical, that can be managed." Managed. There it was again, the language of men who love chaos as long as someone else cleaned it up. She walked to the window and looked down at the street far below, where traffic moved in straight, indifferent lines. "What exactly do you want me to do?" she asked. Derek came closer, lowering his voice. "Keep my name out of it. Say the dinner got emotional because Marcus blindsided you at home about the deal. Say you were under pressure. Say whatever you need to say, but do not drag me into a marital dispute." Claire turned slowly. "You told me I had outgrown him." He looked annoyed now, not guilty. "I was supporting you. You told me he was dead weight. I was repeating what you already felt." The sentence was cruel because it was partly true. Derek had not planted contempt from nothing. He had watered what already existed, then stepped back when the garden turned poisonous. Claire looked at the tablet under his arm. "Did you send the messages Patricia requested?" His face changed. "Not dramatically. Just enough. I am reviewing them." Claire knew that meant no. She also knew why. The messages would show Derek encouraging her to make Marcus look small, to prove she belonged in bigger rooms, to stop carrying a husband who did not match her trajectory. They were not scandalous in the cheap way people whispered about. They were worse. They were professional rot disguised as confidence. At noon, Patricia Wells entered without knocking, which was somehow more effective than any dramatic entrance could have been. She wore a charcoal suit, silver earrings, and the kind of composure that made everyone else in the room seem overdressed and underprepared. Claire straightened. Derek stiffened. Patricia placed a folder on Claire's desk and said, "The review team has received 3 witness statements and 2 voluntary email summaries. We are now requesting all communication related to last night's dinner and the negotiation environment." Derek smiled thinly. "Patricia, with respect, My private messages are not company property. Patricia looked at him the way a judge might look at a bad argument, dressed nicely. If your private messages influence conduct that affected a material counterparty relationship, they become relevant to the risk review. The word risk changed the room again. Not husband, not wife, not embarrassment. Risk. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. Patricia continued. Until the review concludes, all outgoing communications regarding the Meridian partnership will pass through senior compliance. Claire's role as lead negotiator is under temporary reassessment. Mr. Lawson, you are removed from the project team effective immediately pending review. The silence after that was not loud. It was precise. Claire looked at Derek, expecting protest, maybe outrage, maybe one of his clever lines about overreach. Instead, he glanced at her as if she had become the problem he needed distance from. Influence is brave until accountability walks in with a folder. Patricia handed Claire the revised project structure. Marcus had not canceled the deal. That almost made it worse. If he had destroyed it, Claire could have called him vindictive. If he had shouted, she could have called him unstable. Instead, he had preserved the transaction, protected the stakeholders, and removed the people who made the room unsafe for trust. Derek picked up his tablet, muttered that this was absurd, and left without looking back. The door clicked shut behind him. Claire stood with the revised structure in her hands, reading the line where her name had been moved from lead authority to supervised participant. Her career was not over. Her image was. Patricia's voice softened by 1 degree. Mr. Bennett will attend the 4 o'clock governance call. Claire looked up. My husband? Patricia did not blink. The controlling owner. The correction landed gently and cut deeply. Claire nodded because there was nothing else to do. By 4, she would sit in another glass room and present progress to the man she had covered in wine and called useless. The deal was still alive. Derek was gone. Marcus had not raised his voice. He had simply moved the weight of truth to the center of the table, and everyone else was being forced to sit around it. Claire sat in her office. The revised project plan spread before her like a map she did not recognize, the afternoon sun highlighting the edges of spreadsheets and the soft hum of the air conditioning filling the silence. Her phone vibrated once, then twice. She glanced down. A message from Derek, 3 words that made her stomach tighten. Everything is clear. She knew that meant he had disengaged completely, leaving her to navigate the corporate minefield alone. She took a deep breath and tapped her fingers on the desk, recalling the previous day's board meeting where every glance from Marcus had been measured, every word from stakeholders polite but cautious, as if waiting for a misstep to validate their unspoken assumptions. Claire reviewed the presentation notes again, focusing on the Meridian partnership, the upcoming deliverables, and the minor discrepancies she would need to address without Derek's subtle guidance. The morning had been a careful dance of emails and calls, clarifying positions without revealing the undercurrents she knew were alive and attentive. Claire's assistant, Jane, knocked lightly and entered, holding a stack of documents that seemed heavier than they should have been. Claire accepted them, scanning the first pages quickly. Contracts, memos, compliance notes. Marcus had not interfered overtly, but the shift in authority was palpable. Derek's absence was like a missing counterweight, and she could feel the balance of influence tipping around her. Claire called a quick team huddle, presenting the tasks with precision, choosing her words to maintain confidence while managing the apprehension in her team's expressions. She noted subtle nods and furrowed brows, understanding the unspoken questions about stability and authority. The hours ticked by with meticulous care, each email sent with double checks, each call framed to reinforce credibility, each decision considered through the lens of preserving the deal without personal entanglements clouding professional judgment. During a brief pause, Claire leaned back, thinking of Derek's indirect support, the way he had provided insight without direct intervention, the way he had prepared her for this moment, and the absence of him now weighed like a silent partner at the table. She reflected on the lessons of patience, restraint, and clarity under pressure, realizing that her own skills had sharpened in the wake of his withdrawal. By late afternoon, she had crafted a strategy to address Marcus's expected questions in the next board review, presenting contingencies without revealing reliance on external guidance. Claire reviewed her notes, noting the progress her team had made and the gaps still requiring attention. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing she could navigate this landscape independently, a subtle shift from reliance to capability, and the professional respect she would need to maintain with both Derek and Marcus was clearer than ever. As the office clock struck 5, Claire organized the final communications of the day, sending concise summaries to stakeholders and ensuring that all documentation reflected transparency, competence, and proactive leadership. She paused at the window, observing the city below, a subtle smile acknowledging the growth this challenge had demanded and the confidence she now carried forward into the next phase of negotiations and professional interactions. Claire sat at her desk early the next morning, the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the blinds, casting lines across the polished surface, her mind replaying every detail of the previous day's meetings and the subtle shifts in Marcus's demeanor that suggested both curiosity and caution. She sipped her coffee, noting the quiet hum of the office, the occasional click of keyboards, and the faint murmur of distant conversations, all blending into the rhythm of a day that demanded precision and attention to every nuance. Her assistant Jane arrived with a stack of new reports and contract amendments, and Claire reviewed each page carefully, mentally prioritizing the urgent matters and the details that would require her personal touch. Throughout the morning, she orchestrated a series of conference calls, balancing schedules across time zones, ensuring that every partner and stakeholder received clear, concise updates while maintaining the tone of confidence and professionalism she knew was necessary to solidify the company's standing. Marcus appeared briefly in her office doorway, a subtle nod exchanged, an acknowledgement of her command over the ongoing negotiations, and Claire felt a quiet reassurance that her careful planning and measured responses were producing the intended effect. As the hours passed, she coordinated with her legal team to address any potential loopholes in the contracts, reviewing clauses line by line, questioning assumptions, and reinforcing her understanding of each document, aware that any misstep could shift the delicate balance of power and influence within the deal. Claire took a short walk to clear her mind, passing the reception area where employees moved with a sense of purpose, the buzz of the workplace underscoring the importance of her role and the responsibility she carried. She returned to her office with renewed focus, outlining strategic options for upcoming meetings, anticipating questions, and preparing concise, confident responses that would reinforce her authority without revealing any underlying tensions or uncertainties. By mid-afternoon, she had conducted a final round of reviews, double-checking data, confirming communication plans, and ensuring that all team members were aligned with the objectives and expectations. Claire paused briefly, gazing out the window at the city skyline, considering the intricate web of relationships and decisions that had led to this point, and acknowledging the quiet growth in her own abilities and judgment. As the day wound down, she drafted a summary for senior leadership, highlighting progress, next steps, and areas for vigilance, confident that her proactive approach would maintain momentum and reinforce trust. With a final glance at her notes and a deep breath, Claire felt a sense of accomplishment tempered by the awareness that the real tests of negotiation and strategy were ongoing, and she was prepared to face them with clarity, poise, and deliberate focus, navigating each challenge with the careful balance of insight, tact, and leadership that had become her hallmark. Marcus reviewed the latest financial projections at his home office, the soft hum of the city outside the window providing a steady backdrop as he adjusted figures and double-checked every assumption to ensure accuracy and consistency, aware that each calculation could impact upcoming decisions and negotiations. Claire joined him shortly after, carrying a folder with additional documents, and together they discussed potential strategies, weighing options carefully, considering both short-term gains and long-term implications, all while maintaining a calm and professional tone that reflected their experience and mutual respect. They analyzed market trends, competitor movements, and client expectations, each insight prompting further adjustments to their plans and fostering a deeper understanding of the complex dynamics at play. Over the next few hours, they mapped out a series of potential outcomes, visualizing each scenario in detail, and deliberated over the best course of action that would align with their objectives without exposing vulnerabilities or unnecessary risks. Claire suggested reviewing the communication plan for stakeholders, ensuring that every message conveyed confidence and clarity, while Marcus focused on fine-tuning the financial models to reinforce the overall strategy. Together, they simulated meetings and presentations, practicing responses to questions and concerns, refining their delivery to convey both authority and empathy, anticipating the reactions of those involved, and preparing for contingencies. The afternoon progressed with a series of conference calls, in which Claire and Marcus coordinated with partners and team members, confirming details, clarifying expectations, and reinforcing alignment. Each conversation contributing to a comprehensive understanding of the situation and enhancing their readiness for key decisions. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, they paused briefly to review progress, taking notes, highlighting areas that required further attention, and acknowledging the progress made through deliberate collaboration and shared expertise. They concluded the day with a final review of the documents, ensuring all figures were accurate, narratives consistent, and strategies clearly articulated, with each detail meticulously checked and verified, reflecting the thoroughness and discipline that characterized their approach. With the office quieting and the day drawing to a close, Marcus and Claire reflected on the achievements, the careful orchestration of tasks, and the thoughtful planning that had guided their actions, recognizing that their combined efforts had strengthened their position and prepared them to navigate forthcoming challenges with confidence and insight, fully aware that the path ahead required both vigilance and adaptability to sustain momentum and secure the outcomes they envisioned. As the evening settled over the city, Marcus and Claire reviewed the outcomes of their recent decisions, reflecting on the careful planning and measured actions that had brought clarity and resolution to complex situations, each insight offering new perspectives and lessons learned. Claire suggested documenting every step and insight to maintain a clear record of decisions and their impacts, while Marcus focused on projecting the implications for upcoming opportunities and potential challenges, ensuring that every possible angle was considered and accounted for. They discussed the reactions of their colleagues and partners, analyzing feedback and observing how their approach had influenced confidence and trust, strengthening the professional relationships that underpinned their success. As they finalized their review, Claire highlighted areas for continued attention and improvement, suggesting subtle adjustments to maintain momentum and optimize outcomes, while Marcus assessed how their combined strategies would sustain effectiveness over time and adapt to changing circumstances. The evening air was calm as they packed up their notes and concluded their work, both appreciating the thoroughness and dedication that had guided them through a day of critical analysis and thoughtful decision-making. Later, over a quiet dinner, they reflected on the journey, sharing perspectives on what had worked well and what could be enhanced in future planning, emphasizing collaboration, communication, and foresight as key factors in their accomplishments. As the night deepened, they considered the broader implications of their actions and the enduring impact of careful strategy and mutual support, recognizing that each choice had contributed to a more coherent and resilient approach to challenges. With the day fully concluded, they paused to appreciate their achievements and the clarity that came from systematic reflection, knowing that their disciplined approach and mutual understanding had fortified their capacity to navigate complex scenarios with confidence. As you watch this story unfold, consider how you might respond in similar situations, what lessons resonate most, and how strategic planning and thoughtful collaboration can influence outcomes in your own life. Do you find the actions of Marcus and Claire inspiring or thought-provoking? And how would you approach a comparable challenge? If you enjoyed following their journey and wish to explore more stories filled with insight and careful decision-making, subscribing to the channel ensures you will not miss any future episodes that delve into the dynamics of strategy, collaboration, and personal growth.